Welcome to BizTech's Property Show, the show where we feature property markets regionally and globally and give you insights to help you manage your existing properties, get better returns, and also help you make better decisions about your future purchases. Now, our focus on the show today is what and where Asian buyers are looking to buy property around the world. Now, to help us break down the details, our guest today is Georg Chmiel. He's the co-founder and executive chairman of Juwai IQI. Now, he's going to share the results of a survey done by Juwai IQI on the top 10 Asian buyer picks for 2020. Georg, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brian, for having me.
Now, before we get your insights on the report, could you just explain to us what Juwai IQI actually does?
Juwai IQI is one of the largest digital real estate companies in Asia, and certainly the largest across Southeast Asia. We have about 17,000 agents working for us exclusively and have two leading portals, among those Juwai.com, which is the #1 portal for overseas properties to Chinese buyers. Chinese buyers being the biggest buyer group among the Asian buyers. Last year, we transacted about 17,000 properties, and every month we're in touch with about 20 million active users, so people who engage with our content with Juwai IQI.
Now, Georg, which markets do you focus on in terms of your buyer footprint?
In terms of the buyer footprint, our focus is Asia, so the Asian core markets, in particular Southeast Asia, China, when it comes to overseas properties, as well as South Asia and the Middle East. As for the supply, where the properties are located, we are looking on a global scale. So we advertise properties across 111 countries, and we do transactions in about 20 of those countries.
All right, let's zoom into the report. Give us an overview of this report, Georg.
So the report showed that while obviously last year the COVID pandemic restricted and reduced a bit the movement of people because people couldn't travel, it did not undermine the enthusiasm people have for overseas real estate. To the opposite, people weren't able to spend as much, and there has actually a lot of money being saved by people, and they're ready to spend it, and in some cases have already spent it, because these days you can do property transactions online without a visit. You have Zoom, you have the ability to do digital signatures, and online adaptation, in particular among Asian buyers, is very, very high. If you think about on a global scale, e-commerce, half of all e-commerce which is happening in the world is actually happening across China. So half of it. So there is a far greater interest and usage and adaptation of online in our markets than elsewhere. And the numbers are all growing up, whether it's in China, whether it's in ASEAN, South Asia, North Asia, everywhere the numbers are growing.
So basically the pandemic really helped to accelerate adoption of property technologies.
Absolutely, that's the case. I mean, there's various big statements being made by companies such as Accenture, Microsoft, and so on, how big this impact was. Some people say 3 months of COVID were as impactful as 3 years of transformation, digital transformation. Probably the most correct statement is it probably pushed us forward by 10 years, by a decade, because people are now open, doing things completely differently to before. The most simplest example would be, we used to do property events where people would come to an event and look at a model of a property before doing a transaction. We have shifted that completely online, and property people are also visiting properties fully in a virtual environment. That's one of the things which I don't think will ever fully change, particularly in the new property market, in the developer market, because often the developments are not finished or even started. People buy off the plan, and looking at a beautifully designed virtual reality kind of environment is as good as it gets in terms of getting a feeling for if a certain property fits your purpose.
And Georg, also, I can see how having a drone basically, if I was the developer and I'm selling basically an off-the-plan project in Melbourne, having a drone, then flying around the surrounding area to give buyers a perspective, this is what the surrounding looks like, it gives you a very high degree of comfort. In fact, it's a far better buyer experience compared to the previous physical model.
You're absolutely right. People are not just interested in the unit, in the apartment, in the house. They want to know where they are buying, what facilities there are. People are not just buying a house, they're buying a home for multiple reasons. One of the key reasons is education. They want to send their kids for education. They want to migrate somewhere. They want to retire somewhere. They want to live in somewhere where it's nicer than where they're currently living. And the number one buyer group is falling in this category. They want to invest in property. Property has become a really, really accepted investment class. Historically, Asian buyers have always been far more keen on investing into property than other asset classes such as stocks or bonds or other things. And this has only accelerated with the growth in wealth across the Asian markets.
Yes, and also one of the things is the view in Asia, and of course that is true across the world, especially in the area of cheap money right now and ample liquidity. Property is really the hedge against inflation.
Yes, so the low interest rates, the cheap money, as you said, certainly has helped stimulate the property markets further and has led to quite some growth in markets such as Canada, USA, Australia, Singapore, and many, many more. So because what happened in these markets also, property prices started to rise. And then another thing which is important for investors kicked in, the fear of missing out. So when property prices go up, people are saying, I don't want to miss out. I want to be part of the game. And that certainly was, for those markets I just mentioned, an important factor. We've seen also the opposite. I mean, just to be complete there, we've seen also markets such as Thailand, which were a bit more depressed in terms of the property prices, where the bargain hunters come in. So you have it on both sides. You have those who are missing out, and you have those who are hunting a bargain, both being relevant pull factors for purchases.
Now, George, I want to come back to that a little bit later, but let's go back to your report. Could you give us an insight in terms of the methodology used and the sample size used to generate this report?
Yes. So the data which is being used, it's all online data being used. It's tracking the buyer activity on our online media assets, on our websites and other exposures where we give the content to the consumers. And we look into where people are searching for and what are they searching for. And on the back of having 20 million active users, the data is quite relevant. Then we also run it past our country operations. We are operating across 20 countries, and we are saying, do these numbers match what your agents are seeing? I mean, we have 17,000 agents out there, and we are surveying them, and the wisdom of teams comes into play then, and then we come up with quite some good numbers and quite some interesting results when we then summarize it and create the Juwai top 10 Asian buyer picks.
Okay, so tell us, George, which are the top 10 favored location by Asian buyers?
Yes, it feels like an Oscar ceremony. The favorite one is the US. The US is back in the top spot, which has a number of reasons, certainly also towards the end, the upcoming political change in the market, and also that US with the COVID situation became more and more attractive as an investment haven for funds. Australia is number 2, Thailand number 3, Canada number 4, and Malaysia is up at number 5. Singapore also made it to the list this year, wasn't on the list last year, as well as other newcomers include New Zealand. Why New Zealand? Not just Australia, but also New Zealand in particular is very attractive during COVID crisis, because there was a great demand for living on an island far away from all the troubles of this world. Also New Zealand put in place quite some strict restrictions in a few years ago, which kind of shied buyers away, and buyers found no ways to overcome these challenges and to believe in the New Zealand economy again. And also France made it up on the list, which was quite remarkable.
Yeah, and sort of interesting. I'm going to start by asking you about France. That wouldn't be something that you would think we top of mind, but is this the ultra high net worths then buying perhaps ski chalets in Chamonix or something like that? Or is it more what run of the mill? I'm buying a property in Paris because I've got properties around the world.
It's probably a bit of both, because if you look one level deeper into the cities, it's cities like Paris is clearly number one, which would fit into the first category. But number two is Bordeaux. That's the area, where you have the nice vineyards. You're living next. Yes. Also, Lyon is another wine region, Burgundy over there. Then you have Lille, more towards the north, which is a bit more industrial, but also quite close to the UK, beautiful area. And Antibes, which is in the south of France, that is clearly a tourist destination, Cannes, Nice, all these places down there. So I would say it's a combination of investors as well as people who have a holiday home. It's like lifestyle type of properties. And we have seen over the past, we did this research a few times, like for many, many years. And there were always one European country on the list in most cases. France was also a bit of a surprise to us, but then there's also strong ties between France and parts of Asia. So from that perspective, that certainly helped also in the whole equation.
The US is a little bit surprising given the negativity in the whole spectrum with the previous government in the US. Where are people buying properties in the US? Are they buying it in the key locations, New York, LA, or are they going across the US?
They're going across the US, but also a key location. So the number one area was actually Seattle and Los Angeles. So it was more on the West Coast than on the East Coast, the top two. The third one was Orlando. Obviously, bargain hunting and lifestyle is very, very interesting. New York was among the top 5. So was outskirts of Los Angeles. So there's definitely a lot of buyers interested in the US properties who are very, very affluent. Investment purpose is the number one reason why people are looking in. And certainly, people were thinking about having a second home somewhere, and they picked the US as a place. I mean, the US dollars is a strong currency, and that all played out to the result we have seen. We have also seen interest across the US, so not just the hotspots on both sides. Houston, Dallas, Atlanta, and Honolulu. I mean, who can blame people? Honolulu definitely also made it on the list.
Now, Georg, can I ask you, one of the key trends that have come out in the real estate across the world is really that trend towards moving out of the main cities, especially from people who are able to work from home. So to zoom in on some specific cases, there's heavy demand now in the Hamptons from people out of New York, because basically, you're working on Wall Street. If you're on some non-customer facing positions, you can basically work remotely. In the UK, for example, you have people moving out of a shoebox apartment in London, and there's heavy demand for country homes. Could you share some insights into those sort of key trends that are shaping global markets?
It's absolutely a trend. It's a trend in the US. It is a trend also in Australia and in many other markets, that people are moving out of the CBD further out into the country, because what COVID has proven to people, they can actually work anywhere in the world. And suddenly people waking up saying, why would I like to be in a traffic jam every morning going to work and or be in the city? I can live somewhere and have a comfortable lifestyle, and at the same time also go after earning ends meet. So from that perspective, we have seen a strong trend in demand in places like Australia, the US, and in other places to move towards regional areas. So certain regional areas are seeing significant growth now. At the flip side, there's also vacancy rates in Sydney, Melbourne, and other places are going up a bit because two factors are coming in. One is the factor of people moving to the countryside, and on the other side, COVID restrictions are still hindering the return of many overseas students to the key markets where education is taking place.
And George, let's zoom in on that particular point that you just made, that overseas student market. So traditionally, especially in Southeast Asia and in some other parts of Asia as well, the first investments overseas are really for accommodation for the child that is going to, say, Australia or the UK for the first time. That's also led to sectoral overbuilding, particularly, and let's talk about, say, something like Melbourne, where there's a huge amount of supply coming into the market that of finished very high-rise towers. And you're talking already about a vacancy rate. Do you see that then getting to be a bigger problem despite the boom in the Australian property market right now?
Yes, I absolutely do believe this is a bit of a challenge. I'm still hopeful that in the second half, the situation normalizes. In the case of Australia, there's a few factors coming in. There's the political situation between China and Australia. And most of the students, or a large part of the students, are from China. And they're currently not in Australia and waiting to be able to return, which gets hindered by COVID, which makes it harder for people to travel at the moment. Education is Australia's third biggest export after two natural resources, and it is actually employing in Australia 130,000 people. So it is a fundamental issue which you have raised, and students not being able to return to their place of studies have led to high vacancy rates. So if you take Melbourne, Docklands 14%, South Bank 13%, even across all of Melbourne, it's 8%. So I do believe that over time, once vaccination and normalization occurs, people are able to return. But if this trend takes too long, people will start to think of alternatives. Malaysia, for example, has quite a good education system of domestic as well as overseas education provider offering similar courses. So Malaysia is an alternative. Singapore is an alternative. The UK is an alternative. So I'm saying in a competitive market, people won't wait forever till things get back to normality. They will make choices, because there's a third trend also happening. I mean, among the students, one of the biggest group is the Chinese students, and Chinese universities are significantly also on the rise. So domestic education is becoming also very popular now.
And George, what does 2021 look like to you now in terms of the global property market and the Asian buyer appetite for these properties?
I would say it looks good. Why do I say it looks good? We mastered last year, despite COVID, despite all the challenges, and we've seen a very, very strong property market in many areas. Yes, there were issues like the education piece, which we just discussed, but overall, last year has proven that the markets are quite resilient and property prices are stable or increasing. And the markets which haven't picked up eventually will also pick up once the economies start to fire again. So I do believe that we are in a period of gradual improvement, and with more money coming into the economies, the property markets will continue to be strong, because property is, from my perspective, one of the best investments people can make, because it never loses its value fully. and it historically has always performed in the right way. And in particular, if you think about Asia, with a growing population, with growing wealth and all the other factors, property prices will be stable and increasing going forward.
Now, Georg, thank you very much for taking your time to share your views.
Thank you, Brian. It was a pleasure.
Now, we've been speaking to Georg Chmiel, co-founder and executive chairman of Juwai IQI on BizTech's Property Show. I'm Brian Fernandez. Check out www.biztech.asia for business and technology conversations.